Hello, my name is Heather Donahoe and I'm with the Kittson Soil and Water Conservation District. Today I would like to discuss soil texture. Soil texture is the percentage of sand, silt, and clay contained within a soil. This is otherwise referred to as the mineral content of the soil. Soils are also comprised of air, water, and organic matter. But today we're just going to talk about the mineral content. So sand, silt, and clay refer to the particle size, the individual particle sizes. Sand is the largest at 0.05 to 2 millimeters in diameter. And then silt is in the middle, and clay are the smallest. Individual clay particles can be so small, you can't even really see them with the naked eye. So sandy soils tend to have large pore spaces and are well drained, but they tend to have low nutrient holding capacity. Clay soils, because clay particles are highly attracted to each other, or just means that they're really sticky. They stick together really well. So because of that, they have a high CEC, cation exchange capacity. And what that basically means is the soil's ability to store nutrients. But they can tend to be somewhat poorly drained because they have a tighter pore structure. So I have here a sand sample that I bought from a hardware store and a high clay content soil that came from here in Kittson County. Kittson County tends to have higher clay content soils because it used to be the lake bed of Glacial Lake Agassiz, so higher clay soils formed. But these sandier deposits do exist in Kittson. Those are what we call beach ridges because they were left behind as a beach ridge as the lake receded. So something that you can notice about these two is that the sandier soil has much bigger pores, or much bigger particles than the clay soil. And I can put up pictures of these as well for you to look at. Another thing to look at is the color. The sand is much lighter than the clay. Now this does tend to be the case, though in some cases clay can be light colored. But typically clays are darker in color. Today we're going to be doing texture by feel, and that is a soil analysis that you can do out in the field. It's an estimation of the soil texture that you do mostly using your hands. So you can do this inside or you can do this outside. I'm doing it inside and I've laid down some newspaper because it does get very messy. I recommend doing newspaper, plastic sheeting or something. You can do it over the sink, but if you do that, make sure that you have something down to catch the particles, because otherwise the soil particles can clog up your drains. So for this, you're going to need a bottle of water. It can be anything. This is a honey bottle, and I chose that because honey has a squirt top, so it's easier to control the amount of water that I put into my hand. And you don't want too much water when you're starting out your analysis. You're going to need a spade or a spoon or a shovel, really anything to get your sample out, but you don't need as much as the shovel will give you. I just put my spade in and took a sample as deep as my spade is. Then a ruler is really useful. And the NRCS textural chart is also really useful. So I've switched views so you can see my hand and the samples that I'm working with better. I'm going to start with the sand. And we know it's a sand, but we're going to go ahead and go through the textural analysis for it anyway. So the first thing that you'll notice even before you start getting it wet or anything is that it has a light color and that it's got large particle sizes. So then you're going to add a little bit of water to it, just enough to dampen it. You don't want to saturate the soil at first. Oop, that's a little too much. So I got a little too much water, which is really easy to do. So I'm just going to add some more dry soil to it. A little bit more. Here is where the newspaper comes in handy. So my sample is not forming a ball. It's not really got much structure to it at all. Just kind of is a bit of a lump there. So you know that it's a sand when you can't even form any sort of a ball at all. The next thing I'm going to do is feel the texture between my fingers. And what you're looking for here is grittiness or smoothness. Sand will be extremely gritty. Silt tends to be very smooth. It's velvety and soft, almost slick in feel. And then clay has a little bit of a grittiness to it too, but as you rub it between your fingers, the grit will start to break down. For sand, that won't break down. And the sandiness, the grittiness in my hand isn't breaking down, and it feels very much like sand. So most people know what sand feels like. If you've ever gone to the beach and you've gotten sand between your toes, that feeling's hard to forget. So that sandy feeling is what we're looking for, is that grittiness that we're looking for. So that was my sand sample. I'm going to rinse off my hand. So you want to rinse off your hands between samples if you have multiple samples, because the previous sample can skew your results. So my sample happens to be a good moisture content right now. So I'm just going to try to form it into a ball. And it forms a ball, forms a good ball. And then the next thing that I'm going to do, it's called the friability test. You don't necessarily need to do it to get the soil texture, but it's fun. So I like to do it, is I'm going to drop my ball and see if it breaks, which it did not break. It doesn't even have very many cracks in it. It stays a pretty solid ball. So we know that we can make a ball, and we know that it is a tight structure. So now I am going to do what's called the ribbon test. So I just pinch the soil between my thumb and forefinger. I'm going to need to get a little bit more water. It's not quite wet enough. I'm going to get a little bit more soil too while I'm at it. So I'm going to be very careful. I don't want much more water, just a drop, really. Roll that around to get it good and incorporated. So now I'm going to start the ribbon test. This can be tricky, so it might take a little bit to get used to doing this. So I would just do it as long as you can. There we go. So a couple different ones. So I'm going to measure each of these with my ruler. So that's about 4 centimeters, about 5 centimeters, 5 centimeters. And that one's kind of smaller, but that one was my first one. So sometimes it takes a little bit to get the hang of it. So I'm gonna say that it's about a 5 centimeter ribbon. Now we get the sample completely saturated to feel the texture. All right. Now I'm gonna rub it between my fingers. The whole purpose of this is pretty much just to get yourself as messy as you can possibly be. So as I'm feeling this sample, what I'm feeling is a little bit of grittiness. I'm feeling some softness. So my chart says that since it is 5 centimeters or longer, it has a little bit of a gritty feel. It's got a little bit of a smooth feel, but it's really neither one is predominant, I think. So it's probably a clay. This is the more subjective part, so it can be difficult to get down to the exact texture that you've got, but I'm pretty sure I've got a clay here. So there you have it. That's how you do a soil textural analysis. I'm gonna have to wash my hands now. I hope you go outside and get really dirty. Have a good time, guys.